Hi everyone, this is Kim. We're reading Rowan of Rin by Emily Rodder, and this is an audio video, so you're just listening. Chapter 9, Moving On. Rowan woke shivering. The sky was orange and red around the cloud-covered mountain top, and the air was growing chill. John, Marley and Alan were still asleep, sprawled around him on the ground. All of them, even strong John, looked younger and more helpless than this. Their clothes, like Rowan's, were still damp and stinking from the swamp. Their hands and faces were streaked and filthy. Their hair was soaked and caked with mud. How different was this small company from the one which had started off so bravely this morning, and how differently did it feel about his place in it? Rowan watched the three adults sleeping and wondered at the feeling of affection for them that welled up in him. Before, though he'd known them all well from his earliest childhood, he'd been afraid of them. Now he trusted them, not just to look after him, but also almost to like him. He thought about this with surprise. Marley opened her eyes, blinked sleepily for a moment, and then saw him watching her and smiled. She sat up and ran her fingers through her sticky hair. "We'd better wake up the others," she said, "and light the fire. It seems to have been decided that we'll spend the night here." Later, the four of them sat around the blazing fire, feasting on toasted bread and melted cheese, sun-dried fruits, honey and oatcakes, and Sola's best hard brown toffee. It was dark now and cold. The moon shone white in the star-filled sky behind a hazy veil of cloud. While they ate in the bright circle of the light, Alan, Marley and John talked of the village and told tales of time gone by and things that made them laugh. They could have been sitting beside Julia's hearth in Rin. Rowan sat and listened to them as he did at home and wondered why things suddenly seemed so natural and relaxed. Then he realised it was because Brondon, Val and Alice were no longer with them, and Alan had let down his guard. He still chatted and joked as usual, but his mouth had no bitter twist to it, and he was often content simply to sit quietly, poking lazily at the fire. Rowan had heard Julia say that when they were all children, she decided that Alan's joking and play acting formed an armour stronger than Val and Alice's iron muscles or Brondon's bad temper. And in a way, though Alan had grown up now, Rowan could see that the armour was still kept at the ready, and it needed to be, since it was clear for some villagers, like the three who'd left them today, Alan would never be one of them. He would never be quite accepted, however much he wanted to, and however hard he tried because of his traveller father. Rowan watched Alan's lean brown face in the firelight, saw that in a way he was caught between two people, in his own eyes at least. This knowledge kept him on guard, but here and now, with friends he trusted, he could truly be himself. Rowan listened as the others talked, feeling comforted by their presence. No one mentioned Brondon, Val or Alice. No one looked at the map as it lay spread out to dry by the fire. No one talked about the swamp, or the spiders, or the trek still to come. But when the food had been put away, and they had woven Brondon's green stems in the torches for the following day, and the fire had burnt down to glowing embers, the heavy darkness began to press in on them. Gradually they fell silent. Rowan wiggled uncomfortably. They had dried their clothes as best as they could and combed their filthy hair, but they could not wash. The water in their flasks had to be saved for drinking. Rowan would have given so much for such a long, hot bath. Mother would smile at that, he thought. I usually complain about having baths, and once a pang of loneliness stabbed through him. By now, Alice, Brondon and Val would be nearly home. They would surely not let darkness stop them. They would stumble into Rin at a time when people were thinking of putting their lamps and going to sleep. Putting out their lamps. Anade would be sleeping already in the little room she and Rowan shared. Julia would be sitting by the fire downstairs, reading maybe, or mending something. Would she be thinking of him? What would she feel when she heard of the other's return? Alan glanced at his sad face. "The same moon is shining over Rin, you know," he murmured, pointing to the sky. "Think of that." It's not worth picking up the last piece of toffee, Rowan, said Marley, holding out the package. You could finish it for us, I'm sure. The map should be dry by now. Do you think so, Rowan? Asked John casually at almost exactly the same time. Rowan realised all of them were trying to comfort him in their own way. He grinned shyly at Alan, took the toffee from Marley and nodded at Strong John. Oh, look at the map, he said. He brushed the dried mud from the parchment. With his finger he traced the path and found the place where they now camped. It seemed that they had completed about a third of their journey. From here they must turn due west again, climb until they reached what looked like a steep cliff. There, the red line rose abruptly. Rowan's heart sank at the thought of another fearful climb. He looked at the third blank space on the map, and there it was, or rather, there was the spot where it had been. He bent over the parchment, haltingly reading the words in the dim light of the fire. Look for the hand that points the way, and take the path where children play. Then where the face, with breath that sighs, bends to admire its gleaming eyes. Your way is marked by the lines of light. This means escape from endless night. Children, exclaimed Alan. Are we to find people in this place? People mean water, Marley? And hot tubs to wash in, and soft beds and bowls of soup? Perhaps so, Marley, but do not forget that people that can also mean weapons and fear of strangers. There will be many, and we a few. Strong John looked up at the dark, silent mountain. If there is a village so near, it is well hidden, he said. Still we shall. Let us rest now. We will start at first light. It will be well to be early visitors, if visitors we are to be. Despite his tiredness, Rowan lay unsleeping for some time after good nights had been said. The others lay quiet. John and Ellen rolled up like caterpillars in their blankets. Marley lay flat with hers flung over her. She would be cold in the night, he thought. He himself was warm and the fire banked up and glowing, but the words of the map verse ran around and around in his head, always ending the same frightening way that would jerk him awake and start the process all over again. Endless night, endless night, endless night. He woke with heavy sounds, the sounds of Marley heaping earth on the fire and Ellen whistling. It was still quite dark, but the sky had lightened and somewhere where birds were singing. Rowan thought of Star and the other Buckshire moving to the pool for their morning drink with Gilla and Anaid. He imagined their bewildered snuffling sounds as they found water even lower than before. They would be getting very thirsty now. They would taste the brown muddy stuff that was left, and then they would shake their heavy heads and paw the ground, and would be wondering where he was. We are going as fast as we can, Star. Rowan closed his eyes and thought the words as hard as he could, as if he was doing this message that could reach his friend. Soon we will be at the top of the mountain. We will make the water flow again soon. Then he remembered, and his eyes flew open again, filled with horror. Tomorrow or the day after they would reach the top of the mountain and the dragon. His heart lurched and he felt sick. So much had happened to him. He'd been so afraid on this journey that for a while he'd actually forgotten about his greatest fear, until now. And then he thought of something else. Another day, another dawn, and the mountain was silent except for the birds. Again the dragon had not roared. He was still considering this when they set off again, due west and climbing. Alan, he said timidly, do you think that the dragon could be dead or gone to another place? I certainly hope so, replied Alan cheerfully. After thinking the matter over carefully, I've decided that I prefer not to meet it. There was no sound from the mountain top this morning, put in Marley. Nor was there last night, agreed Strong John. He glanced at Rowan. Many do say, of course, he added, that there is no dragon at the top of the mountain. No one has ever seen it. We have no proof that the old stories about it are true. Brondon certainly did not believe it, said Marley. Instantly the same thought entered everyone's mind. Brondon had not believed in anything she had not seen with her own eyes, and Brondon had found that she'd been very wrong. Strong John began to walk a little faster. He was carrying Rowan's pack again, but even without the extra weight, Rowan had to struggle to keep up. After a while, he had no energy to think of anything but the steep way ahead of him, as perhaps John had intended. They pushed through some ragged bushes, clusters at the top of the rise. Then Ellen exclaimed and Marley muttered under breath. Rowan looked up. Rising over the top of the trees directly ahead of them was a sheer cliff of red gold rock, glistening in the first rays of the sun. He gasped for breath and stared at it, fascinated. He realised that he'd seen this place before, many times, while tending to the buckshire at sunrise, but then it had been small and far away. Then gazing up at the mountain, you'd see a mass of green, then a strip of red gold, and then the cloud that hid the mountain's tip. But now the cliff rose in front of him, and he could see that it dropped like a cloud, from the cloud like a wall almost as smooth as straight as the side of the mill of Rin. He could not climb it. He knew he could not. The very sight of it filled him with terror. He pressed his lips together so he would try not to cry, and despair welled up in him. They had come so far and fought so hard, only to be defeated by the mountain at last, for it was not only he who could not climb this cliff. The closer they came to it, the more he could see that no one could climb it. There was no footholds. There was nothing to cling on to, that red gold stone, not a plant or a hole or a sharp piece of rock, nothing. "We have a problem," Ellen remarked. "So it seems," Strong John said. He scanned the cliff with his narrow eyes. "We should not despair," said Marley, wiping the sweat from her forehead and shivering at the same time. The air was cold now, and a chill wind blew around them. "The way may be clearer for us when we arrive at the spot." Ellen and John looked grim as they began walking once more. Rowan could see that they did not share Marley's hope. But when half an hour later they emerged from the trees and saw what lay at the foot of the cliff, they realised the wisdom of her words. "A cave," said John. He peered into the dark opening that was like a door in the rock, a very deep one. Could it be Rowan? They clustered around Rowan as he unrolled the map. A red line moved upwards quite steeply, that was true, but not as steeply as the cliff rose to the clouds. "Wonderful," caroled Ellen. "An easy way, and indoors out of the weather too." He turned to Marley. "What a relief." She forced a smile. "Indeed," she answered, but Rowan saw that her face had grown pale. They lit one of the torches they'd made the night before. It flared up and then settled to a slow and steady flame. Marley led the way, holding the torch out stiffly as she stepped into the cave. Piercing shrieks greeted them, shrieks and flapping of 1,000 leathery wings as bats in their hundreds to stir from their daylight time rest, fell from the roof of the cave and wheeled around them, beating at their faces. Shouting, they bent their heads and crouched on the sandy ground, their arms protecting their eyes. Rowan could hear himself screaming with the others. It seemed an age before a high-pitched screeching sound had died and the panic-stricken creatures had departed. Only then did Marley, Strong John, Ellen and Rowan rise slowly to their feet, breathing heavily as if they'd been running. They looked at each other, and then Ellen grinned. "Who was more frightened, do you think, we or the bats?" Relieved laughter echoed on the stone walls. The torch flickered, casting high shadows. "Look!" cried Rowan. At the far end of the cave, by the side of the wide arch open that seemed to lead into yet another chamber, stood a tall, oddly shaped rock all by itself. It was narrower at the bottom than at the top, and it was pointed, a long, narrow finger of stone. "Look for the hand that points the way." Torch held high, they walked forward through the archway, deeper into the mountain. And that's the end of that chapter.